They said the devil was in Sweden. But it wasn't the devil they found. Imagine you are hiding in your own basement. You can hear them above you. Your neighbors. The ones you borrowed flour from last week. The ones who helped you fix your fence. They aren't looking for gold. They aren't looking for food. They are tearing your house apart, plank by plank, for one reason. They are looking for a ghost. And they are convinced the ghost is inside you. Welcome back. Today, we are diving into one of the most insane, completely forgotten chapters in European history. Not the French Revolution. Not the Black Plague. This is the story of the time an entire country basically had a shared psychotic break. This is the story of the Holy Ghost Riots. A decade-long fever dream in 18th century Sweden where preachers weren't just preaching, they were projectile vomiting, speaking in alien tongues, and leading mobs to literally beat the demons out of children. By the end of this video, you are going to be looking at your own neighbors a little differently. To understand the riots, you have to understand Sweden in the 1760s. Life was short, brutal, and freezing cold. Crop failures were common. Famine was a constant, unwelcome guest. The government enforced a strict form of Lutheranism. If you didn't show up to church, you were fined, or worse. Into this bleak world, a new religious movement called Pietism spread like wildfire. Forget the boring old state church with its Latin and rituals. Pietism promised a personal, emotional connection to God. It was about feeling the Spirit in your guts. And in a population starving for excitement, literally starving, this was more addictive than anything. But the line between feeling the Spirit and going completely insane was incredibly thin. This was a world with no Netflix, no internet, no escape from the cold. Feeling something, anything, even terror, was better than feeling nothing at all. And in the 1760s, in the province of Dalarna, the feeling finally snapped. It starts small. A woman in the congregation starts shaking during a sermon. Her eyes roll back. Then another person. Then 10. Within minutes, the entire church sounds like a heavy metal mosh pit. People are crying, screaming, barking like dogs. They called it the Spirit. We might call it mass psychogenic illness today, a physical reaction to extreme psychological stress. But to them, it was real. It was holy. And it was terrifying. Here's where it gets truly dark. The people experiencing these fits weren't just happy about it. They were convinced they weren't just touched by God, they were invaded by something evil. Welcome to the concept of the Andliga Gastningar, spiritual visitations. The symptoms read like a horror movie script. Victims reported a burning sensation in their chests. They felt their bodies levitate. They claimed to vomit nails, glass, and hair. One diary entry reads, "The boy complained of a great heat in his bowels, and a lump moving up to his throat. Then, he began to speak in a voice not his own." Now, this is where the revival turns into a riot. Local preachers, men named Anders Hesselberg and Anders Boberg, developed a cure. And their cure wasn't prayer and holy water. It was exorcism by violence. They believed the demon had to be physically tortured inside the person to make it leave. So they'd whip the possessed until they bled. They'd force them to eat disgusting concoctions. They'd choke them until they passed out. And if the person stopped screaming, that meant the demon was gone. They were saved. Sounds insane, right? But hold on. Before you judge too harshly, sit with this for a second. This is 250 years ago. If you genuinely, truly believed a demon was about to drag your child's soul to hell for eternity, wouldn't you risk a few bruises to save them? That uncomfortable question is the terrifying logic at the heart of the Holy Ghost riots. And soon, this logic escaped the church. It took to the streets. By the 1770s, Sweden wasn't just praying anymore. It was hunting. Mob justice, blessed and often led by the local preachers, became the new normal. People formed prayer groups that functioned as vigilante squads in towns like Falun, Gagnef, and Rättvik. If you were a little too quiet, if you had a birthmark, if you argued with a powerful farmer about a cow, boom! You were possessed. The riots targeted the weak, the elderly, single women living alone, children. The mobs would drag people from their homes, tie them up in barns, and perform prayer battles that lasted for days without food or water. One of the most famous cases was a woman named Anna Svedberg. She was accused of bewitching a child. A group of exorcists held her captive in a barn. They sang hymns at her for 72 hours straight. For 3 days, with no breaks. And when the singing stopped, they beat her with sticks, trying to force the demon to flee. When the authorities finally showed up, Anna was barely alive. But here's the part that should chill you to the bone. The people who did this weren't criminals. They were farmers, blacksmiths, mothers. They were your neighbors. And they truly, deeply believed they were the good guys. Another case, a young boy named Nils Larsson. His only crime was being an orphan with a sullen disposition. A mob seized him and held him for days, subjecting him to constant prayer and physical correction. He eventually named other people in the village as demons, just to make it stop. The hysteria was a virus, and it used human fear to replicate. The violence spread so fast that the king in Stockholm, Gustav III, had to step in. King Gustav III looked at his kingdom and realized it was descending into chaos. If the church couldn't control the people, the state would. He sent out royal decrees outlawing these unauthorized prayer meetings. He sent soldiers. But how do you arrest a ghost? How do you stop a belief? Eventually, the hammer came down. The government stopped arresting the possessed and started arresting the preachers. In the biggest trials of 1770, men like Anders Boberg were put in the hot seat. The judges asked the question we're all thinking: did you really think you were casting out demons, or were you just beating people up? Boberg claimed he was just following the Bible. He was just doing God's work. But the state didn't care. They sentenced him to prison. They made an example of him. By 1780, the riots were over. The demon was gone. The possessed fell silent. But here is why I am telling you this story, right now, in 2024. Because the Holy Ghost riots aren't just a history lesson. They are a warning. Look at the formula: a society under stress, economic anxiety, a loss of trust in institutions. And in that vacuum, charismatic leaders rise up and tell you exactly who to blame. They point at the other living right next door. We like to think we're too smart for this. We have iPhones and science and the entire history of human folly at our fingertips. But mass delusion doesn't care about technology. It cares about fear. It cares about the need for certainty in an uncertain world. The ghosts aren't real. But the fear is. When the preacher, or the pundit, or the influencer, gives you permission, people still pick up torches. They still form mobs. And they still go looking for demons in their neighbors' basements. Today, if you go to Dalarna, Sweden, it's peaceful. Idyllic. You'd never know that 250 years ago, people were screaming about demons in these very streets. The forests are quiet. The farms are still. But the history is there. Not in the landscape, but in the court records. In the diaries. In the uncomfortable truth about human nature that the story exposes. The last person officially executed for witchcraft in Sweden was in 1704. Her name was Malin. They burned her alive. The last person accused of being possessed in Sweden was probably last week. On a Facebook group. On Twitter. By your uncle. By a stranger. By you, maybe, without even realizing it. The name of the demon changed. The fire didn't. If you made it this far, you're one of the people who can handle the deep dives. And I need your help to keep making them. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think, do two things. First, smash that like button. It's a small thing, but it tells YouTube that this kind of storytelling matters. Second, hit subscribe. We dig into the dark corners of history so we don't get lost in them ourselves. And share this video. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that history doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme. Thanks for watching. Stay curious. And maybe, take a good look at your neighbors. Just in case.